Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm the host, Sean Boyce. I'd like to welcome my guest to the show today, Douglas Brown from Halo Consulting. Hello, Douglas. How are you? And thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Sean. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited to talk more about yourself and your experience. But before we kind of get into that, if you wouldn't mind to familiarize yourself with our audience, if you could go into some background about, what you've done and how you got to be doing what you are today, would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sean. So name is Douglas Brown, CEO at Halo Consulting. I've been in recruiting for about 10 years and have had the opportunity to work at a variety of search firms, contingent, retained, et cetera. And, I've had the opportunity to learn a lot along my way on my journey. So I've been in recruiting for about 10 years. I won't bore the audience with how I got to where I am today, but we can fast forward to the beginning of 2020. I started a new role in January of 2020, started as a director of partnership, and a few months in, the pandemic hit. So I was furloughed in the beginning of April. So I took some time. It was really only a couple of days to really think about my next big move and what I wanted to do long term. So Halo was founded on April 22nd. And really since then, the work has been nonstop, obviously in a good way. But it's been a roller coaster ride over the last, I think, 22 months. So what we do at Halo Consulting, we provide the process-oriented best practices our team developed at top executive search firms with a cost-conscious scrappiness that you'd expect from a boutique or startup. We are a values-based search firm on a mission to grow organizations that will change the world for the better. And, since the inception of Halo in April of 2020, we've hosted 15 virtual roundtable events, and those really started in October of 2020. So we host those on a quarterly basis, and those events are tailored to HR and tech executives and leaders. And since Halo's inception, we've completed searches across the sales, HR, and tech functions at what we call the emerging leader level, which is typically director level up to the C-suite. And we primarily work with tech companies in the pre-IPO and startup space. And one notable thing to add is, throughout our 22 months in business so far, 40% of our placements have been female and or males of color.
That is some impressive track record for only having started that business relatively recently. So I could definitely relate when it sounds like it's been quite a ride so far. Congratulations. That's very exciting. I want to dive into a number of these different areas in a little bit more detail. I think before kind of go into that, you've given a pretty good overview of the business. Can you talk a little bit more about, you mentioned kind of the beginnings of a customer profile, like what does your customer typically look like? What does the value proposition of what you offer look like for them? And then, what services do you offer?
Yeah, so we prefer to partner with high growth tech companies that are seeking a high touch value-based search firm to build and expand their teams across the HR, sales, and tech and engineering functions. I would say, we're not your traditional search firm. And I know that you probably hear that a lot. But I will say that we add a white glove service, high touch experience with the candidates and the client as well. And that's, something that has allowed us to differentiate ourselves from the market.
Very cool. And then how does your business model work? I know I've spent some time in recruiting myself as well too. So I know a number of the different options, but I'm curious to learn more about which options you're offering.
Yeah. So at the inception of Halo, we started out on a contingent basis, obviously having experience in recruiting, it was difficult to go in and ask for, a retainer-based search in the very beginning. I would say over the last 6 to 8 months, we have rolled out what we call the exigent model. It's a combination of contingent and executive search. And what it is it allows the client to be able to gather market insight on, the market and candidates and what's going on. So the way our fee structure is set up, it's 25% of base and bonus. We do ask for 30 days of exclusivity on the search as the only search partner. And then after 3 candidate interviews are completed, and those are separate interviews, we bill for 1/3 of the fee, and the rest is the remainder is upon placement.
Awesome.
And then we do offer,
sure.
we do offer a 90-day guarantee for director level searches and below, and then a 180-day guarantee for VPs and above.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. And one thing I want to ask a little bit more about as well, too, is because having a little bit of experience, I have an HR tech business that we talked about previously called Staff Geek as well, too. And we saw quite a gyration, I want to say, in the market due to the pandemic, because our product is very directly related to hiring as well, too. So I have to imagine, in this instance where you started your business, it was in a kind of uncertain time. So I'm curious for the industry, obviously. So I'm curious to learn more from you about what that experience was like, and then what you would attribute the success that you've had to, given the nature of, trying to offer a service like that in a very uncertain time and a kind of very disrupted moment for an industry like that. It was quite the challenge, but so far so good. So I'm curious to learn more about how you did it.
Yeah, great question, Sean. So the pandemic, I know it's affected everyone differently, and working in the office and then transitioning to a remote workforce has been difficult for everyone. And I understand that we're still in the pandemic today, and it might be a little while until we're fully out of it. But in terms of how Halo has succeeded during the pandemic was actually really a blessing in disguise. And what it allowed for Halo to do was to really get in front of clients and customers that, we might not have typically had the opportunity to if it was, prior to the pandemic or pre-pandemic. And it's really interesting. We've done a lot of, good work up to this point. But in terms of some searches that we've had the opportunity to pitch for, there have been a couple of CTO searches that we pitched for that we unfortunately, didn't win the business. We were able to work on a chief marketing officer search for a big tech company, and really, from hosting the virtual roundtable events and being able to provide value to HR and tech executives, in addition to being able to pitch Halo via Zoom versus having to fly and meet in person and pitch that way. It's really been, like I said, a blessing in disguise, and it's something that has allowed Halo to grow quicker than we actually expected.
Awesome, very cool. Obviously, what we talk a lot about on this show is the feast and famine cycles that service-based businesses, in particular consulting companies like yours and mine, go through upon occasion if you're not careful. Essentially, all of us have experienced it probably at least once. The objective then is to try to solve it as best we can so that doesn't happen again. I know, your business is relatively new, but I'd be curious to hear more from you in terms of if you've experienced these cycles before, and whether or not you have. What do you attribute to, or what areas are you investing in to keep you out of the the famine type trap and valleys that consulting-based businesses can go through?
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned that, Sean. I will say, for Halo, the hardest thing that we've had to go through up to this point is, knowing where the business is coming in next. So again, Halo was founded in April of 2020. The first, we'll call it, 4 to 6 months were a little difficult in terms of, not knowing where the, next source of business was coming in, or, if we were able to make payroll. But my co-founder, Patrick Ballmer, he has a motto that we live by here at Halo, and that is execution is the best business development, or best BD. And that's something that, we've seen a lot, throughout, the 22 months that Halo has been in business. So my colleague, Nick Ingram, and I, we were submitting a couple of RFPs over the last 2 weeks, and we realized that I think it was 7 out of the 12 clients that we're working with today are repeat business. So to answer your question, it's the peaks and valleys, that obviously, comes in the nature of recruiting itself. But, we're in a spot today where, business is strong, and, we're in a spot where, we have the ability to kind of pick and choose, the work that we want to, get involved with. So, probably not the answer you were looking for, but it's, execution is the best BD. We haven't had as much trouble getting new business or repeat business as we have in the past. And, moving forward, it should only get better.
Sounds like progress to me. And that's helpful context as well. Like something that I'll reinforce, because we've seen this at Staff Geek as well, too, is, weathering that storm is a big deal because inevitably, it cycles, right? And I think what we've started to realize is that hiring has been going like gangbusters for a while now. So after obviously there was a lot that had to go into managing the pandemic, but after companies kind of paused, took their breath, and, the dust settled, so to speak, in terms of we have an understanding, like it started to stabilize. I saw a lot of companies then, who had abruptly kind of shut off hiring, turn it back on like full force and hire as aggressively as they could. So I imagine you're probably experiencing a bit of that now as well. That's probably part of what's keeping you guys so busy today.
Yeah, it really is. There are, tons of companies out there that are hiring, trying to expand their sales or HR team or tech team. I will say that it's 100% a candidate market right now. And, we're working on a sales search with a CLM company. It's a contract lifecycle management company. We've lost a couple of candidates due to, how hot the market is today. This one individual in particular, he ended up accepting the offer, but ultimately did not get started on his start date. And he received another offer that was, I think, 70 or 80K higher on his OTE than what my client had to offer. So, again, it's a candidate market at the end of the day right now. And, for those that are interviewing and for those that are not, it's always worth taking a conversation with a recruiter just to see, how your experience aligns to the rest of the market. And, having that conversation in turn, you might, find out that, the opportunity that, you were reached out to about is actually an interesting one and could be a next, good step in terms of, your career progression.
Well said. And obviously advantageous to be well positioned to be able to take advantage of the demand when it does return in your market. So important to position yourself well there. I'd like to talk more about something that you and I have discussed previously, and you mentioned it earlier on this episode as well, too, this concept of the virtual roundtable. Very interested to learn more about that. A lot of strategies you talk about on the show, different strategies and tactics for, combating kind of the feast famine cycle that a lot of consultants find themselves in, as we refer to, right, the consultant trap. The virtual roundtables of yours, I imagine, is probably a pretty effective strategy for combating that just in general, where you're doing more, farming as opposed to hunting, the analogies that they use as it pertains to like business development. So tell us a little bit more about the virtual roundtables in terms of like what they are, how they came to be, why you've decided to invest in them, and the kind of results that you've seen from making that investment.
Yeah, so the virtual roundtable events, really started in the inception, probably in September. Actually, it would be maybe like the August, September timeframe of 2020. My co-founder Patrick and I were discussing, what other avenues would be beneficial for Halo as well for our attendees and audience to be able to gather insight and experiences from other individuals in the HR and tech space. So the idea was to create a strong community in order to bring these individuals together and to be able to create a networking group. The virtual roundtables have been fruitful up to this point. Like you said, Sean, it's the difference between hunting versus farming. And, I'll tell you this, I absolutely love to, go out and, be hunting going after net new logos and new business. But the farming aspect has really allowed Halo to be in a spot where, we're having more conversations, with HR executives and other leaders, of organizations and companies. And it's really put us in a spot today where, we're getting new business and having these conversations, learning about, talent needs, what it looks like in 2022 and beyond. And, it's been fruitful up to this point.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I enjoy the hunting aspect myself as well too. So that'll always be an element, right? It's always great. It's also great for testing, but the farming component, I feel like, can also really help you reach scale and then, help you weather the storm in those times when something uncertain may be happening, right? Insert basically what happened in our industry vis-a-vis pandemic related stuff. If you wouldn't mind, can you, for our audience, talk to us a little bit more about how the virtual roundtables work? How they operate, how you ultimately decided to design them, how frequently they happen, who attends, that type of thing. So the audience can learn more from you in case that's a strategy they want to deploy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the virtual roundtable events, again, they started in October of 2020. Up to this point, we've hosted about 15 up to this point. And the way that they work is, so my team and I, we reach out to individuals that we think would be a good speaker for a particular topic. So to give the audience an example, we just hosted a virtual roundtable event 2 Fridays ago on January 14th, and that was centered around HR and the new normal. So we invited Dr. Tania Davis, who is the Chief Talent and Administrative Services Officer at HBR Consulting. We had Meg Newhouse, who is the CEO at Inspirant Group. And we were also joined by Jennifer Mancuso, who is the Vice President of Human Resources at North Highland. And we did have a moderator for that event, and her name was Maureen Green James, and she is the SVP of Global Diversity, Equity, and Belonging at FTI Consulting. So knowing the topic, we wanted to reach out to individuals in that space that were in the consulting vertical today, consulting or professional services vertical, to be able to create some alignment for the speakers, versus just having, the speakers being, from different verticals and industries. So that's one thing that we wanted to focus on, and we've seen a lot of success with that. We typically try to host a virtual roundtable event every quarter. So our next virtual roundtable event we'll host in early Q2, and that'll be the future around total rewards, and where that's headed. So that's going to be a really exciting event that we'll be hosting. We'll be taking a similar approach in terms of, reaching out to individuals that we think would be, good individuals to be a part of the panel and, have some insightful experiences to share. Again, they started out virtual. I think, depending on, where the pandemic goes over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, it would be interesting to be able to host, some sort of roundtable event in person. But ultimately, that's not dictated by me. It's, more up to letting nature take its own course. So.
Well said. And I imagine the virtual roundtables being probably as successful as they already are for you guys just adds a whole other extra level of scalability and flexibility and those types of things as well too. So super timely. Had the virtual roundtables led to you guys being able to form new relationships, which led to new client opportunities as well too? Like, have you gotten business out of investing in that as well?
Yes, we have. And it started out a little slow in terms of, running the events on a regular basis. I know I mentioned that, we do, well, I guess our goal in 2022 is to, have a minimum of, one event per quarter, probably going to be in that 4 to 7 events in 2022. So yeah, I would say the idea is, really to focus on, the approach to getting individuals to attend the events that we would like to ultimately do business with, today and or in the future. So yeah, to answer your question, Sean, the events have been successful up to this point. Like I said, it was a little slow moving in the very beginning, but we have landed, we'll call it 3 to 4 clients from hosting these virtual roundtable events. And, we've made a lot of connections along the way as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I can't reinforce that enough. Excellent ROI essentially there in terms of it's also something that you have to offer to folks, which is investing in them and providing them with value, right? I always pick on the folks that are constantly harassing me on LinkedIn with some kind of message that says something like, hey, you buy this. And it's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do, but I'm not necessarily like, I don't have my credit card out. Right? That's not how this usually works. But instead, you're creating great content. You're creating an experience for folks. You're focusing on topics that are very relevant. And for when you do want to ask people, right, it's something engaging, something that they can get value out of, right? So it starts building your relationship on the right foot, which makes a ton of sense. And then you get further investment from it as well, too, as it grows from there. It becomes a life of its own. So thank you for sharing that, Douglas. I think that's one excellent area that folks can take a closer look at to kind of solving the feast and famine trap is investing in areas like this to have opportunities to grow their business more predictably. And thank you for being here to share your knowledge. I only have a couple questions for you before we let you go. The first is, are there any resources you might recommend for our audience where they can go to learn more about anything we talked about today?
Yeah, so some resources that I'd like to share with the audience. These are some books that I've listened to on Audible, over the course of the last 2 years. And to name a couple that were really impactful, and I had some strong takeaways. The first one would be The Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. We've Got Answers by Charlemagne the God. And then the last one I can mention would be 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters.
Those are some heavy hitters. Love all the ones that you mentioned. I've read them myself. I'd also recommend each and every one. So thank you for sharing. And then last question I have for you is, who should reach out to you and how can they get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to partner with high growth tech companies that are seeking a high touch, value-based search firm to build and expand their teams across the HR, sales, and tech and engineering functions. You can reach out to me directly at doug@haloconsulting.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Halo Consulting 1, and feel free to follow us on Twitter as well, Halo Consulting _.
Thank you for that, Douglas. And we'll link to all the resources and contact info in our show notes. And thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Consulting Trap. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, or you would like to be a guest on our show, please send me an email at sean@podcastchef.com. That's Sean, SEAN, @podcastchef.com. PODCASTCHEF.com. Before we go, we'd like to thank the sponsor of our show, Podcast Chef. Podcast Chef helps turn ordinary podcasting into a revenue-generating lead magnet for your consulting business. Our Podcasting Done For You service takes away the headache of starting up and running your own podcast. Reach out now to take advantage of our 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit us at podcastchef.com to find out how our team of experts can help you leverage podcasting to take your consulting business to the next level.